link to YouTube later.
We got it.
Totally. So let's begin. You can follow along if you would like. So I pledge allegiance to
the flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States of
America,
and to the republic
to the republic
for
which stands
one nation,
One
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
justice
with
liberty
liberty
and justice
and
for all.
justice for all.
Man, that always sounds awful.
Yeah, but you know, it's fun doing
It
something
works.
together. So really quickly, I'm going to put up the agenda just so everyone can see it. So what we have today is we have a climate action focused meeting. So we have two guests. We have Steve Dunbar and Ann Brown are both here today to give us some ideas of what's going on locally with climate action and the environment and what we can do to help with local actions. So we will be basically hearing from the two of them. Before we start the meeting, I just really want to give a big shout out. We had about a little under 100 volunteers come out for different actions that took place as the recall effort. We had thousands of interactions, and we managed to win by a decisive margin. It was an insanely important race. We really needed to win this one by a large margin to send a message that you can't just be going around recalling because you feel like it. You can't just come and try to have minority rule in this nation, that we really are a democracy. And so I'm very proud of everyone who helped out. I'm very proud for everyone who volunteered and showed up. And I want to thank everyone who's here and everyone who is watching later. Thank them all for coming out and helping us defeat the recall. So with that, I want to get right into the meeting. And so we are going to start, let me stop sharing. We're going to start with our very own Steve Dunbar, who is going to be presenting on CAMP, the Community Asset Management Program in Livermore. And while the presentation is focused on Livermore, it has ramifications and applications for all of the surrounding areas as well, and every city, honestly. And so without further ado, I turn it over to you, Mr. Dunbar.
Thanks, Evan. Watch me change my background to wear the hat. Now I'm wearing the hat. Good evening, everyone. Steve Dunbar. I wear a lot of hats, but I'm a member here too. The hat I'm wearing tonight is the Community Asset Management Program for the city of Livermore. So we'll be talking about what are assets and what are the issues with assets right now in the city of Livermore. And then I'll kind of go a little bit off script and bring in the Tri-Valley and environmentalism to mesh with the theme of the night. So I'm gonna share a screen. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Very good, perfect. Okay, and I even got the subtitles going on the bottom. So, jumping right in, Livermore Asset Management is one of the council priorities for the city of Livermore. And so we have this subcommittee that is going around and talking with the community, you tonight, but this is my second one actually. So we're gonna keep going. We're gonna be at farmers markets and other things to get feedback, to get community feedback. So, slide. And go to the next slide. There we go. So we're going to talk about asset management. We're going to talk about prioritizing assets. And then, like I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about environmentalism in the Tri-Valley. So we also need to think a little bit generationally. So we'll get to that at the very end. So without further ado, we have a video. That's the first thing. And we're going to see if this video works. And I have it as sharing audio. So hopefully it'll come through.
Did you know that you own a lot of Livermore? Roads, retaining walls, streetlights, storm drains, parks, and public buildings, they all belong to you. That's about $3 billion worth of infrastructure. The city's job is to take care of it all. We call it asset management. caring for our shared resources so they last for future generations. But what does it take to care for all that public infrastructure? Let's use an example, an intersection with traffic signals, to show what goes into keeping our assets strong. If we can understand what it takes to maintain one signalized intersection, we can appreciate what it takes to care for all our assets. Here's our signal. It's not just the red, yellow, and green lights that need attention. There are several parts to a signalized intersection. There are the light fixtures themselves, supporting poles, pedestrian lights, pedestrian call boxes, traffic cameras, controller, and sensors. Installing a new signalized intersection costs about $450,000, including planning, design, parts, and labor. The signals here will get serviced 4 times a year to make sure they're working well. This costs about $2,000 a year. But even with regular maintenance, the signals will need replacement parts over time. We can expect to pay about $100,000 on repairs, replacement parts, and new technologies to keep up with changing safety requirements. So our signalized intersection will cost around $650,000 total during its entire lifespan. And this is just one of more than 100 traffic signal intersections in Livermore today. And there are many more assets to care for. All over the city, we maintain your roads, bridges, streetlights, stormwater systems, trees, trails, and city buildings. Livermore is 150 years old, and much of our infrastructure is old too. We love Livermore for its historic charm, but it's not so charming if things stop working. That's why we're planning for changes and challenges, and protecting our assets from future risks like climate change, flooding, and wildfires. This is the smart way to keep our assets safe. And we're taking advantages of new tools and technologies to modernize how to do business. It's also much more economical to care for our assets over their lifespan, instead of waiting until something breaks. All of our assets require time and money to maintain. Even though we've been careful caretakers, the reality is that we don't have the money to keep everything at the tip-top level we'd like. We've also had to meet state and federal mandates that required us to spend more to upgrade our infrastructure than we initially anticipated. That's left us with less funding for the future. We need to find the right balance to make sure that Livermore's assets last into the future. That might include making adjustments to how we currently manage our assets, or exploring new funding options to help pay for future needs. That's what the Livermore Asset Management Program is all about, and why it's important for everyone to join the conversation, so we can maintain Livermore's excellent quality of life for future generations. We will need to make important decisions down the road, but if we work together, the Livermore Asset Management Program can be our green light to a great future. Share this video with your friends, and visit our website, livermoreassets.net, for more ways to get informed and involved.
All right, so that was the real fast intro. We're going to break it down. That's why I'm here. Next slide. So we've got lots of old assets. We're 150 years old now. And so some of the things we built very early on and some of the things we built 50 years ago are coming due on us. So what does that mean? It means we don't have the funds to care for the assets that we have to maintain them at that tip-top level that we're used to. The things are slowly breaking and we are only seeing these effects slowly, but it will catch up with us. So what does that mean? Well, here's an overview of the levels that we're talking about. We've spent the last couple of years being staff, breaking down all the assets we have. We have it all in this big GIS database. It's a big map that has everything the city owns and what it costs to maintain and what it costs to replace. So we know how much we're spending. We know all the assets we have and how much they cost to replace and what their average lifespans are. So we know what we should be spending, and we're not spending that. And we're talking about an average over a long period of time. So, the signals might not break today, but we might have 3 break all at once in a particular year. So we have this $10 million shortfall to a minimum level of service and a big shortfall to repair everything over the period of time. So we have some choices to make. When we're talking about assets, we're talking about more than just roads and streetlights, even though that was the example. We've got roads, but we've also got stormwater is a big issue because there's a lot of mandates about cleaning up our stormwater to make sure it doesn't run off into the bay. We've got our own city buildings, and we've got a bunch of other infrastructure. So we'll break that down. What are they? So this is the definition of an asset here on screen, something that the city owns that requires repair and maintenance. And asset management is managing all of those assets in a way that is maintainable, is shared for and structurally maintained for not just our generation, but 200 years from now. The requirements may change, but we're still going to have all this stuff to maintain. And so we want to make sure that all these assets are still here and giving us the quality of life that we want. So we have to figure out what we own, and we've done that. We figured out what needs to be done, and then now we're developing policies to match that funding that we for sure have with the quality of service that we want. But then we need to figure out what extra we could get out. We're going to only go up to the funding we have. So here we've got some more examples of assets. We've got trails, we've got fountains, we've got streetlights, stormwater systems. The airport is an asset. The airport is city owned, but it does maintain sort of a separate fund balance. We've got more buildings here. The walls along our streets are also a city asset that the city generally has to maintain. There are some city-owned parks. There are some LARPD parks. So we've got a lot of things. So here's the categories that we've created here. And I know I'm moving kind of fast. We're going to stop for questions. Don't worry. So we've got streets, sidewalks, curb ramps, curb and gutter, bridges, streetlights, traffic signals, traffic signs, and landscape barriers that are roadway related. And we have all these non-roadway things like the golf course and the trails. Trees are even an asset because they cost money to replace if they die, right? And then separate from all of that, we've got enterprise funds. And I'm just going to talk about this for a quick second. Enterprise funds are separate because we fund them as their own piece via user fees. So you pay for your trash pickup, you pay for your water. The people who own airplanes and use the airport pay for it through fees to store their airplanes and fees on the gasoline that they buy there. So those are sort of pay for themselves, and they're categorized to pay for themselves. So we're not really talking about them here. It's really the general fund stuff that we really want to focus on. And we have $2.4 billion worth of these assets. And let's just say all of them break in 50 years. That's, many millions of dollars a year. And some of them break a lot faster than that. We got to repave roads a lot faster than that. As I mentioned, it's a priority to the city council. So they've selected from just a few core ideas. And this is one of them that the city council has directed the staff to focus on. And so we need to have sustainable infrastructure. We're not setting enough money aside right now. We know that for sure. So what do we trade off to make sure that we are putting the money aside that we put aside? And we need to decide with all of you, with everyone in the community, how much that is. Do we go all the way to $40 million? Or do we fund some different number of assets? And do we prioritize them? All right. We've already done some surveys on this. We did a survey in early 2020, and here are the results on screen. So we ranked them from order of most important in the initial survey to least important. This is where I prompt you to think about, does this match your priorities? Is the averages that came up in this survey aligned with what you prioritize? And what might you rank differently? So think about that for a second. for those of you that are not in the city of Livermore, your city probably has exactly the same assets, maybe not the same number of them, but the same categories. How would you prioritize your own city for this? So we don't have $40 million lying around. I think I've made that pretty clear by now. And we definitely don't have it every single year, continuously. And I can't break down my budget right here in front of this meeting, but we don't have it lying around. So we can't just shift stuff. We actually have to prioritize and make choices. So some of the choices that we're talking about are right here on screen. We've got user fees. That's a scary one, right? We've got reducing maintenance schedules or selling some assets entirely that don't bring us a lot of value. We've got the needs on the left sort of balanced. Repairing them is just the basic, and repairing and maintaining is just the very basic, but some we might even want to upgrade, make better parts and stuff like that. So that's the question pose. Here's the part where we talk about the strategies. So we need to understand the support for all of these strategies that we have on screen. There's a lot of them, but I won't read them out loud just yet. You can go and use your smartphone to find this survey that we're sort of separating from the first survey, and we're doing these polls. I'm also going to post in the chat the link so you can get to it directly. So you can take that as time permits. You can take it after we're done talking as well. So this is kind of where I stop and I ask you. We've got all of these strategies here in front of us. We've got focusing just on the public safety ideas and ignoring things that are beneficial and part of our quality of life, but maybe not public safety related. We could get rid of assets that aren't used as much. I think I have some ideas sprout to mind, but these are the general ideas. I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I'm just going to take your questions, because that's what this is really about, is gathering your feedback.
How do I raise my hand?
Well, Ellis has got it.
Ron, you go down to participants and you click on raise hands. If you have a PC. Do I have the floor?
You do indeed.
If I was going to prioritize, I would say number one is health, number two is safety, and number three is the environment. And breaking it down, slicing it the way that it was sliced, doesn't really bring that out. Coming out of this almost 2-year pandemic at this point, or however many months it's been, the emphasis on health is very apparent, even in a city. So making sure that, for example, vaccines are available, places to get the vaccines are available, places to do the testing are available. Now, granted, the county took on much of that responsibility, but the city has some responsibility in those areas. And in particular, things like mask enforcement, that some cities have mask mandates and like that, but they haven't allocated any money for enforcement on that, as far as I can tell. And then there's safety that would come before a whole lot of other things. Now, granted, the traffic stuff, that is not having potholes and your traffic light working, that's a safety type thing. But I would go with that kind of prioritizing.
Thanks, Ellis. Thanks, Evan's given me the order, so I've got the order, and thanks for that, Evan. Mary.
Okay, I have a a couple of questions. First of all, I'm not going to talk about prioritization. I picked out pieces of this. How much planning goes into incorporating what we know could happen with climate change into the maintenance schedule and plans for our asset management?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Anne's also here, not for the climate action plan, but it's something that we've actually had a joint meeting for. We've had a joint meeting of the asset management and the climate action plan committees because they're so intertwined. You know, for example, one of the effects of climate change might be more severe rainfall events at once, meaning more flooding.
Right.
And we've already had some damage to our stormwater system a couple of years ago that we're actually still recovering from. So we've used that to inform what we think it's going to cost down the line to maintain all those pieces. Obviously, some of that's Zone 7 and some of that's the city, but it does go into the factors. In terms of letting old assets go, that is definitely part of it too.
Okay, because I'm thinking of extreme heat events. I have read that very high temperatures can melt asphalt. Most of our roads are asphalt. And I do remember the 2017 flooding. The trail paths went out at Arroyo Seco and some other things. There were some expensive repairs, and actually they went beyond repairs. They improved it. So yeah, I'm looking at that. That was one question. Then just an observation. I think the least important thing and the easiest to sell would be the golf course, and that's an opinion. And then we have a lot of funding coming down from the government, from the federal government, on infrastructure, either coming or may soon come. Is there a way of incorporating that, or should we think about that when we do our calculations for our own infrastructure, our assets?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to think about it. The way that I personally think about it is that if the government does come with all of these stimulus funds that help us repair our assets, the first thing that we have to do is make sure that we're not spending it on a bunch of shiny new things, but actually accounting for all the stuff that we have to do first, right?
Yeah.
And the other way to think about it as well is, even if we get all that funding, we're thinking 2 generations out. You know, there might not be a funding the next time. So we still have to, it's still going to cost us $40 million a year. It just might take longer for us to run out. So we're still not planning sustainably for the next generation if we only think about it in terms of stimulus funds. I know you're not saying that. That's how I'm contextualizing it.
It helps to hear it. I just thought of a fourth question. Can I
Sure.
take another minute? So I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but our assets are separate from PG&E. And correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, separate from PG&E, but there's been a lot of discussion for the last couple of years that I've followed off and on about setting up microgrids. And it's something that would, I think, be a very good idea. Would that, I mean, this is pie in the sky, but would it fall under the umbrella of asset management?
We would definitely.
Dan is shaking his head.
Dan's shaking his head. It's not that the asset management system will not drive that purchase. But if it was municipally owned in some way, we would have to account for how to maintain it. So we would have to think about the funding for how to maintain it.
In addition to everything else.
That maybe it isn't municipal, and maybe East Bay Community Energy does it. There are other pathways. The other thing to think about is where the microgrids might start. Like, do we start focusing on community centers first in terms of climate change and then work to other areas? what do we work on the city hall first? I don't know. That's kind of beyond the scope, but it is a question related to climate change.
Thank you.
I haven't figured out how to raise my hand online.
Well,
so
good
put me
news,
in the
Van, you're up
queue.
next anyways, so.
Oh, I am? Okay.
Yeah.
I've got some questions about storm drain runoff. As far as any storm collection, and does any of that go to the sewage treatment plant, or does it all get directed into our arroyos?
Sorry, give me that question. Claudia was waving goodbye at the same time.
No, the storm drain runoff, does any of that go through the sewage treatment plant, or does it all go through our arroyos?
That's beyond my knowledge. I know not all of it is treated for sure. I don't know what percentage though.
And I'm also wondering about certain developments like percolation basins and business parks and the like. Do those serve to mitigate some of the costs that are anticipated for, things like storm drain runoff?
Another good question that I don't have the answer to off my head, but I can ask to the right people.
Okay. That's it for me.
Am I next?
Yes.
Next is Jackie. Yes.
Thank you, Van, for mentioning that. That was going to be my second comment was we have, as far as I know, all the storm water, it just goes out to the bay. So we have this situation in the wintertime where we have all this runoff water and it's not being captured. And it always amazed me that we don't have a regional approach. And it may not be a city thing per se, but it's definitely a water resource thing. And I think it needs to be a priority. That's number one. And then two, my question was about selling assets, specifically property. What is the process that the city uses to notify citizens that they'll be selling assets, and what does that process look like?
So I'm the first one you had was a regional approach to runoff capture and reuse. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. I ditto what Van said. And I think we really, it's stupid. Water just goes right out into the bay.
Yeah.
And then we cry about water and trying to capture water. And we have a big missed opportunity every winter. So that's number one. And then two was the assets. If assets are sold, what is the process that the city utilizes to notify people that they're going to be selling assets? What does that process look like?
So I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is the city typically declares property they don't want anymore, property they don't own, as surplus when they want to sell it. And it goes through a bidding process, but there are state rules about the order in which it is offered, depending on whether if it's suitable for housing or commercial development. Other questions like that come into play. That's a much more technical, I don't want to present myself as an expert there, but that's a very high level overview.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Yeah, as far as the aggregate mining operations near Livermore, are they within the city of Livermore or are they in the county?
The aggregate, I believe all of them are unincorporated. I'm not sure what the plan for Lake A is when that gets turned into a park asset of some type, but when they're currently being mined, I believe they're all unincorporated.
Is there any chance that we may be able to use those properties as storm drain collection?
Yeah, so this is, you want to go ask Zone 7 about this, but there is some sort of plan for how they're going to reuse the chain of lakes when the mining is done.
Right.
All right, I think I've run through questions. How am I doing on time, Evan?
Good, I think we should wrap up fairly soon. Claudia did have a question before she went that I think is an interesting one. I don't know if you have the answer to it or not. It might be one you have to take away, but the question is, which assets have the best return on investment accounting for climate change?
Yeah, some of that's objective and some of that's subjective, right? Obviously. What is a return? What is an investment? What is a return on investment? I mean, it could be just monetary, straight monetary. We've talked about, roundabouts don't cost money to maintain because you don't have to keep the lights up, but there's a perception of them. So, what is the right or wrong answer? There really isn't one, but that's what we're here to talk about. Okay, so to wrap up, I see Mary's hand, but I'll start going, and I'll leave the opportunity for one more question or two. So I've framed this in Livermore terms. Hopefully you get the chance to take the survey. It's in the chat, so click the link and don't forget to take it. This applies beyond Livermore. I can tell you for sure that all cities are going to have this problem based on the way that California works in some way, shape, or form. Dublin's a lot newer in terms of, all of its assets are way newer, at least on the eastern side of the city. But eventually Dublin will need to replace those too. It just will take a little longer. So we've seen some of our older cities to the west have the problem that we're trying to make sure that we don't have in terms of maintenance and making sure we have the funding for it. And then the prompt back to the point of this whole meeting is return on investment in terms of climate change. What do we invest in knowing what is going to change? And I've put in some little pieces here and there, community centers, and when we have bigger heat events, really maintaining our stormwater when we have higher levels of runoff, are things that we don't necessarily see right now. But when you take this survey and when you talk to your friends about what's happening here, put in a comment that says, stormwater is safety, or something like that. Because if we don't plan for what it might be in the future, then it becomes a lot more difficult when we have different amounts of money just to fix it after the fact, as we've seen with prior flooding. That's not necessarily an endorsement of that particular approach, but it's something to keep in mind as we go forward with this process. So thanks for letting me give the overview. Mary and Van, if we have minutes.
Okay. I believe I have already. Hello?
You almost froze there for a second.
Oh,
you're back
sorry.
now.
Good. So I'm pretty sure I already filled out this questionnaire because I've seen this event before, and I attended a couple of the camp meetings. But can I fill it out again, having done it before?
When was the last time you saw it? Because the survey started, this second round of stuff started in August. So if you've taken it between a month ago and now, then you filled out it already. If
I should do it again, it sounds like.
That's what I would recommend.
It's been longer than a month.
Yeah.
So my question, Stephen, is about, the current change in the state government and federal government about infrastructure investment. Is the city, dedicating any resources along the lines of grant writing that would engineer proposals that could, have access to some of the state and federal funding?
I don't know the staffing structure for how we do grant applications directly. I do know that at a high level, the city cut a bunch of positions during the Great Recession and never really hired them back. So we tend to be lower in staffing than our neighboring cities per capita, pretty significantly. But beyond that, I think the main part of the grant writing is just what assets need to be fixed and when they're going to break. And so luckily we have put in the staff time to have that database. So if we do need to write a grant, we know exactly what to write the grant for, because we have this prioritized list, and we'll keep changing, shifting the priorities, tweaking the priorities because of all the community feedback. But we know what to go after. So
that's it for me.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. One last question came in from Richard that I think is kind of important. For filling out the survey, do you want everyone to fill it out or just Livermore residents?
So it should be giving you a question at the top that says whether you're a Livermore resident, and it will. So you fill it out honestly, and it will be separated to identify that. Hopefully,
Perfect.
if that's not happening, put it in the chat and let me know.
All right. Thank you so much. And so I just want to kind of to put a cap on all of this. First of all, thank you, Stephen. That was very informative and really great. I really appreciate it. Exciting to hear. And as Stephen said, this is a problem for every city. It is not just a Livermore specific problem. So it is something that you should be, checking in with each of your own respective cities and seeing where they're at in this process. And I think it leads us very well into our next topic, which is it leads us into our next topic because it really emphasizes how when we're thinking about climate change, when we're thinking about its effects locally, regionally, nationally, we're thinking very much in the term of multiple generations. So the actions we take may or may not affect us in our lifetime, but we're taking actions that, could be well past, our time on this planet, but will have dramatic impacts beyond that. And so this thinking in terms of 50, 100, 200 years is an important part of the thought process with climate change and how our actions now will affect what the world looks like in 100 years. And so with that, again, I want to thank Stephen for the wonderful presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Anne Brown from the Citizens Climate Education. So Anne, take it away.
I'm going to take my hat off.
And you're muted.
All right, thanks, Evan. Sorry, I've had a little tech difficulties, but I think I'm good now. So I am Anne Brown, and I came to climate activism because I had the fortune of growing up with a childhood in nature. Raise your hand if you also had that privilege. You got to play in the woods, by the lake, by the creek, right? So it's really interesting. When you look at a lot of environmental leaders, they also had those really impactful childhood experiences. And what motivates me, one of the things to be a climate activist, is wanting that opportunity for those next 7 generations and beyond to have meaningful, safe, healthy experiences connecting to nature outdoors. And as we can see just this summer, a lot of those really beautiful, special places are burning up and flooding and otherwise changing. So I'd just like to ask a few of you, do any of you have a special place that really resonates in your heart that you want to pass on to future generations as that you have enjoyed in your life? So go ahead and raise your hand. Van.
Yeah, basically the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Yeah. All right. Flowers. Let's see who's the hibiscus. Jackie.
The redwood forest up north, the Avenue of the Giants. I joined Friends of the Forest after visiting up there 25 years ago, and I've been donating ever since. I love the mountains and the redwoods.
Okay. Who have we got here? Ronald.
Mute. Southeast shore of Lake Tahoe.
Ooh. Got a little close to the fires, didn't it? Ellis?
Oh, much too close, yes.
I'm a New York City boy, Brooklyn, New York. And we have this thing there called Coney Island. And most people aren't aware of this. New York has its own ocean. And I enjoy the ocean and the beach. And there's something calming about falling asleep on the beach, listening to the waves. I remember my parents taking me there as a kid. We didn't have air conditioning. Nobody had air conditioning. And we go down to the beach on a very hot summer day. Well, summer night. And there were lots of people who went to the beach in Coney Island and fell asleep there listening to the waves.
I'm really glad you brought up the ocean, because the ocean is, of course, really impacted by climate change, and we're seeing a lot of changes happening there very quickly. Evan.
Yeah, so mine is also actually the ocean. I grew up by the tide pools, and I've definitely seen major changes in my lifetime to the ecology of the tide pools. So that's a special place for me.
Okay, so thanks everyone for sharing. Oh, we've got one more, and he even has an iceberg in the background. Alan.
Got to unmute, Alan. There you go.
The Mendocino coast.
Beautiful. And there's also been a lot of changes with kelp and other wildlife up there. Okay, so I'm going to go into sharing my screen. I think we all have established. Okay, so Evan, did you make me a co-host?
Yes, so you should be able to share.
It says host disabled participant. You know what? I had to log out and log back in, so you may need to do it again.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, so you should be seeing a, let me minimize this. You should be seeing my slideshow. I'm going to put it in present. Whoa, everyone's seeing my title slide.
Looks good.
Okay, so this was the title we came up with for this little presentation. And I'm going to talk about some actions that start with that wonderful analogy of the ripple effect. Okay, so we can all create a ripple effect, and it just depends on where we want to put our energy and sphere of influence. So we see at the center, of course, are one individual persons, and we're going to go through each of these ripples and look at some examples of things that we can do here locally and really make an impact as we go forward. So I'll be returning back to this. So first level of ripple are the personal and private actions that you're already taking to lower your carbon footprints. And I know a lot of you are aware of this. You've been doing it probably for a while. And so let's just share out a few things. Ellis, your hand is still up if you have one you want to share. Are you doing anything to lower your carbon footprint?
You're still muted.
And maybe you could help me out, Evan, by calling on people, since I need to, I don't want to take up the whole screen with the gallery view. So anyone want to share something they might be doing already to lower their carbon footprint?
Yeah, I didn't have my mute thing in the right position, but we've got solar panels on the roof for both water for our pool and for electricity. So that somewhat lowers the carbon footprint.
Awesome. Mary.
My house is very, very well insulated in the attic and in the subfloor. That's one thing. I try not to use the water heater there too much. So when I'm doing laundry, the machine is totally full, and that also affects my water usage.
Okay, so Mary, that's good. We'll call that energy efficiency. Mary, we're going to just limit, to a few things.
One per person, okay.
So we have renewable energy going on, and we have energy efficiency in our homes. Evan.
I'm a big fan of whenever I can, I try to bike to work.
Yay, lower that carbon footprint. And Van.
So we put solar panels in this, last summer. The other thing that we've done is we've sold one of our cars off, and I now have an electric bike that I get around town with.
Oh, what a great example. Okay, another transportation. And Miss Hibiscus, I can't see your name on this.
It's Jackie.
Jackie.
We subscribe to East Bay Community Energy. And so all of our power that I'm purchasing through PG&E is the non-carbon. So that little bit, I can't afford solar myself. So that's one way I can help.
That's right. And you can opt up to 100% renewable energy with their deep green option. It just costs a couple more dollars a month. And that way you're assured that all your energy and use in the home is renewable. So those are some great actions that we're already taking. So what could be really impactful is if we aggregate our actions together, and through the City of Livermore's Climate Action Plan update, I'm on the advisory committee, I suggested that we have a Livermore branded community climate challenge page. So that apparently is coming. But if you want to get started right now, you could go to Project Drawdown's ecochallenge.org website, and they have different challenges, and this might give you some new ideas on some things that you could try. So I'm going to screen share. Am I on the new website now, Evan?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the global eco challenges. This is created by Project Drawdown, which probably many of you know about. And if you scroll down, you'll see the People's Eco Challenge. And this is, they have themed challenges every month. This is for the month of October. And it's just some small steps that lead to big change. So if you go to register, you'll find that there's these action categories. So maybe you want to try an action in a category you may not have thought of, or you think you could make some improvements. Waste, food, health, transportation, energy. We're already doing some of these things, but you might want to get some new ideas. So really simple, you're going to add up points. You're going to see what other people are doing. I think they have 400 and something people in this challenge so far. Now we're going to take this type of concept for Livermore, and I'm not sure about Dublin and Pleasanton, but we're going to aggregate all of our efforts as a community, but within our community of Livermore, we can also create teams. So teams could be any group that wants to form a team, and they can also make a rivalry with another team. So for example, the two high schools could be rivals to see who can bring down the most greenhouse gases, et cetera. So teams can be formed, and that element of kind of competition, but also group synergy can really help motivate people. So these are some really cool tools out there. So that's one thing to consider when our private and personal actions can be amplified through a platform like this. Okay, next on the ripple level is our social networks. And we all have them. We're in one kind of now, although this is organizational. So one of the things that we can do is start climate conversations. And some of you may be familiar with this wonderful hero, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, and I highly recommend her TED Talk. It's only 17 minutes, but she has some amazing good points. And so you can just Google that and watch her. I'm not going to try to repeat all her wisdom here. But one of her main points is one of the most impactful things we can do for climate is to talk about it. And I know it's even true for me, is that I don't usually tend to bring it up when I'm with family and friends as much as I certainly could. So that's one idea. The other is to tell our climate stories. And the climate stories are a little bit about how we started this conversation. I talked a little bit about my childhood, growing up in nature. And I want to just show you a really wonderful website, the Climate Stories Project. It has a lot going on. So you see up here, all these pull down menus. They give you ways to tell your stories. If you want to see other people's stories, you can go on this map and click on all these locations around the world, and they're going to bring up a recording of a person in their setting telling their climate story. I mean, I want to hear about other parts of the world as well as our own US of A. So that's a tool for that. Like go up here. I just finished a book about Inuit people, and I want to hear more about what's going on up there. And if you really like this idea, you can become trained as an ambassador to collect interviews. And I think it would be really interesting to interview especially elderly people here in Livermore, Pleasanton, Dublin, about what they remember this place to be like. Because one of the things we're realizing is when you're born into an environment, you think that's the normal, and you set your bar based on your experience without realizing what it would have been like 2, 3 generations ago. A lot of people use the fishing sort of an example, like how much more abundant and large the fishing stock used to be. But now our kids growing up think that these little puny scarce fish is the normal. So collecting stories is a really cool example. And also I encourage you to go to this website, because not only do they use stories, but music. And there's some amazing music on here. And a lot of people are very moved by music. And I highly recommend you experience some of these musical interpretations of what's going on with climate. So that's another resource. Okay, so we're going to look back at our Ripple. We've looked at private and personal, social. Let's go to organizational. And of course, here we are in a wonderful organization, Tri-Valley Dems. Oh, before I leave climate story, these are just kind of some of the things you would think about as you're creating a climate story. And what you can do with that website I just showed you is you can record it on an audio recording, and it will be uploaded into a library. Or you can have somebody videotape you, or you can film yourself on your own phone telling your story and send that in as well. So these are kind of some of the things that you might want to talk about in your climate story. And I especially think about the lives of others I love. And a lot of these people that I love that are impacted by climate are people I read about or I watch on a video. So I may not know them personally, but I'm very moved by their stories. So there's a lot of good books out there with climate justice stories. A lot of people are moved about wildlife. In fact, you'll find there's a great video of a wildlife photographer talking about his climate story on that website. And our feelings, how we feel about these impacts that the climate crisis is having, and how do we feel about the future? And then what gives us hope and courage and the possible actions and solutions. Oops. So let me progress on to organizations, because we, of course, will have a lot more impact working with others, with organizations with a shared mission. So I put up here things like a green business network. I think we need to make this a presence in the Tri-Valley, where we can have our green businesses that are using sustainable practices really visible to the community, really promoted to the community. We don't currently have a green business directory that I am aware of, but the California Green Business Network has something that's a statewide. Other organizations, of course, are communities of faith. So I put this little graphic in here. I'm working with a wonderful organization called Green Faith, and they have actions and lots of tools for houses of faith, not only to kind of green their own operations, but also to speak out for climate justice, especially for the indigenous people in the world who are suffering climate impacts. There's an event coming up in October, Faiths for Climate Justice. And I'm trying, I have limited time, but I really would love to see an event in the Tri-Valley on that day. There is a person in Pleasanton who's registered an event. So I will share that information with Tri-Valley Dems when I get more info. Our schools are another huge organization, and there are lots of parents out there who really care about climate. I just did an outreach table at the Dublin Splatter Festival, and I mostly was talking to families and kids and parents, and they are motivated. They want to do something, but they need to be engaged. They're so busy that they need people reaching out to them and helping them to get engaged. So I think there's a big potential there. Of course, we have many clubs like Rotary and other clubs, sports teams, and so forth, that we could speak to. All of us climate activists have great presentations and lots of good information to share, and I'll show you a few examples coming up. And then, of course, there's alumni organizations. So anywhere you think of, we could bring speakers to them. And by we, I mean not just Tri-Valley Citizens Climate Education, but there's a wealth of other climate organizations, such as the Climate Center, Elders for Climate Action, and so forth, that can bring information and engage organizations. Does anyone here have an organization that you would like to see engaged in climate in some way, or do any of these things resonate with you? And Evan, maybe you can call on people.
Sounds good. And I actually put in chat, but just to bring your attention, I
Sure,
think
yeah.
Innovation Tri-Valley might be a great organization to reach out to about a green business network.
Oh, super idea.
Yeah, I think they would like the idea, and I think they'd be able to help us.
Okay, thanks so much.
I don't belong to any organizations, but I'm a Democrat, so I guess that goes hand in hand.
Yeah, that's a biggie. And we'll talk about that level coming up. I think that's the next ripple.
Ellis?
Well, I was going to talk about the next ripple, and that what we do is frequently we lobby our elected officials. But
Okay.
before we lobby them, talking about our elected officials, before we lobby them, we get them elected. So we have a pretty good impact on some of our elected officials on the federal level, like you see right there, and also on the state level. And also we've helped elect people on to city councils and school boards and other various kinds of boards. So I'm looking forward, if it's the next ripple, to talking about a piece of legislation that it's not actually legislation, an action the federal government can take, and the club might lobby that. But I'll bring that up when we get to the next ripple.
Okay, so are you seeing the public ripple on the screen now?
Yeah, that's the graphic I'm looking at.
Yeah, so the public ripple. So I just, again, you got it on the totally, is first getting and ensuring voters' rights. And I know a lot of you are probably engaged in that topic because voters' rights is a really important issue right now. And then, you know, of course, we want to elect officials that are climate friendly. And so Eric Swalwell has endorsed or co-sponsoring the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is one of the main focuses of Citizens Climate Lobby. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, and I'd be interested in what other legislations you know about. So there's that federal level that's really important. Another way, of course, is through our cities and state. And every city has a climate action plan. Pleasanton is also updating theirs right now. Dublin's is completed. And San Ramon, they are just, there's a climate committee. And I think they're going to try to get the council to start their update of their climate action plan. So that's one way to be involved on the city level, as well as other commissions like the Assets Group or the General Plan, which is coming up, and they're recruiting people for General Plan in Livermore right now. And that's really important because climate will be integrated into all the other planning that has to go on. So this is their website for the Climate Action Plan. If you want to look at it, you can see all the kinds of draft measures. It's not approved yet. It's about to go to City Council. We meet the first Wednesday of every month on Zoom, and that's on the city website. If you look up Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee, then you'll get the agenda, the Zoom link, and all of that. So that's coming up soon. Now, a few other pictures I wanted to show here to kind of relate to what we do. Also, we want to encourage in our chapter. One is to use art as a way of messaging. And you see here a parachute that was painted by students in Eugene, Oregon. And we're going to paint a parachute at the Livermore Art Walk on October 9th. I'm collaborating with Angie and Cola of Bothwell Arts, and we have some student painters lined up. And so we're going to have participants help paint a parachute that can be used not only for fun games and interaction, but also as a big visual messaging tool. So please come on down to Art Walk. If you don't want to paint, you can observe and appreciate the student painters. The other thing over here is protest. And we have had some really great protests here. We've had Tri-Valley for Black Lives. We did have a climate event, but it was very sparsely attended. So we want to encourage, at least those of us in our chapter, agency among our youth to have their voices heard. And some youth have started a coalition of youth environmental clubs, so that clubs in the different Tri-Valley high schools have a website and they have an Instagram and they have a way to communicate with each other. We're hoping this will lead to a youth summit later on this year. But we need leadership. We need the clubs to step up and take this on. And they're really just getting going for the school year. So not sure if that will happen or not. So let's hear some more ideas about maximizing the public ripple. Somebody wanted to talk about legislation.
That was me, and it's not exactly legislation. As it turns out, the oil companies have what do they call it? The Petroleum Institute, which is their lobbying function. And the Petroleum Institute has worked against the environment. They've lied to the government. They've put on commercials that are very misleading. They're really the enemy of the environment. And most people in the environmental movement would agree to that. Unfortunately, the corporations that support the Petroleum Institute and other such lobbying groups do not tell their stockholders how much money they're contributing to these various lobbying groups. About half the corporations that are publicly traded do report that, but the other half, the guys wearing the black hats, not the white hats, do not report that. As it turns out, Janet Yellen, the SEC chair, Securities and Exchange Commission chair, has the power, just with her signature, to require corporations to report all of their political spending in their annual report, which is a report to stockholders. The SEC's charter is to protect stockholders. And by telling them what you're spending the money of the corporation that they owned on, you're protecting them. And what I would like to do, and I'm going to propose this to Evan, is put together a letter from the Tri-Valley Dems to Janet Yellen and have various Democratic clubs throughout Contra Costa and Alameda sign on to this, and probably the central committees also, which is the county Democratic Party, signed on to that. And we're going to ask Eric Swalwell and Mark DeSagne and probably Jeremy McNerney also to not only sign on to this, but deliver it to Janet Yellen for us. And that way we would force the disclosure. And that's what I'm going to propose.
I'd like to add that there should be an additional, documentation of pass-throughs, donations to the likes of the Heritage Foundation, all the kinds of dark money avenues that have been utilized by the petroleum industry for decades now, and the Koch brothers have, taken full advantage of. And those should be outlined as clearly as possible as those kinds of institutions which support disinformation and misinformation against the interests of the environment.
Thanks.
I'd like you to help me write that letter, Van.
Yeah.
You bet.
So you bring up a good point, Ellis. I didn't include on here, but I probably should have. Pressuring our retirement funds, et cetera, to divest in fossil fuel investments, as well as to change banks, which is something I still need to do, because the banks that are the dirtiest banks are funding continuing fossil fuel development. And there's many other choices out there that are actually banks that are helping communities and doing good. So the power of our money, where we invest it and where we get our financial services, can also make a big impact, especially if we make public why we are changing banks to our friends, our family, in the public, even letters to the editor, as well as writing to the banks themselves. So thank you for bringing up that really important point. Okay, I'm going to move ahead. So we did, now we're at the biggest ripple of all, the systemic and cultural changes that are going to take time and a lot of heavy lifting, but will really enable us to have a sustainable future. So the graphic on the left is about Kay Rayworth's donut economics model, which maybe you've heard of, but it's a wonderful model. And if you go on her website, you will see where we are doing in terms of these 3 concentric spheres. Okay, so the social foundation are things like, do people have enough to eat, adequate housing, clean water, and what parts of the world are in shortfall? They are not meeting those basic needs of their populations. The middle layer is about a safe and just space for humanity. That's the sweet spot where everybody has enough and we are thriving without destroying the natural resources upon which we all depend. But if we start to overshoot that, we're going to hit this ecological ceiling. And you'll see on her graphics which countries have way overshot that ceiling in certain aspects. So it's a really great way to look at and strive for this safe and just space. And what does it need? It means that people that overconsume, and not just people, but of course countries and businesses and so forth, need to cut back. And so it's a real shift in our values, which are, traditionally based on the growth model, the unending, never-ending growth model. We are coming up to finding out that there's not a whole lot more to grow. We've used up so much of our planet's resources. So this graphic here, I took right off the Livermore Climate Action Plan website, and it's kind of hard to see some of what these icons are about, but it's basically linking things for a vision to the future. I'm not quite sure why the airplane is in there, but maybe that's an airplane running on a hydrogen fuel or something. I know good old Norway has launched the first commercial electric airplane. So there's a lot coming on. How do we incentivize this kind of change? Well, those of us who lobby for a carbon price think that is one foundational building block to get a lot of other things in motion, because as fossil fuels become more and more expensive, there will be great incentive to ramp up with renewables and other alternatives and bring down those greenhouse gases. So I want to show you a tool that I just learned about and I'm all crazy on. It's an app. You can just get it on your phone. It's free and it will give you all kinds of actions to do. So if you look at me on the side here, I'm holding it up and my screen says, tell your representative that the solar industry is growing 12 times faster than the economy as a whole. So I have a lot of things I can do with this message. I can send it, I can earn points, I can customize it. I've already customized my own profile to say, I am a teacher. I could say I am a mother who cares about climate because, and I fill that in. So they know right away, this is not a robo message. This is a real person who is messaging me, whether it's through tweet, email, or a phone call about this particular issue. So I highly recommend you go into this app and check it out. We're going to start loading up Tri-Valley actions, and I'd love to collaborate with people in Tri-Valley Dems to get actions in our code 143 that relate to our local environmental issues. So it's about climate action. So it's going to be kind of anything related to climate. And then we can have those messages go to people like Dave Halbert, or our city councils, our mayors, even school boards. So this is very customizable, and it's just getting launched. I just featured the developer at our Tri-Valley CCE meeting this month, and he's really excited that we want to get on board and use this app to take actions. And believe me, it's so fast. You can sit there, while you're waiting in a line, and you can do 12 actions, and they all add up points towards planting a real tree in a tree planting project in Africa. So we're doing something physically important eventually as well. Another thing is that you could explore on your own time is a simulator called the En-ROADS simulator model. And you can move these levers to change what's going on with all these different inputs on energy supply to our global temperature increase. And I'm very happy to present a workshop to groups, classes, and so forth with this model. But you can just go into the website and start experimenting on your own. So those of you who had energy efficiency in transport or electrification, you can see what a difference that would make if applied on a global scale. Same thing with that building, energy efficiency, go Mary. And electrification of, I want to go back. Notice there is a lever or a slider for carbon price. So you can experiment with different levels of carbon price and see what difference that makes, as well as carbon removal, like planting more trees. How much difference will that make? Some of these solutions are not yet invented, like new zero carbon source of energy, or technological carbon removal has not really ramped up yet. But again, I'm happy to demonstrate this model for anyone because it's based on a gazillion mathematical equations and real science. And then you come to your own conclusions about what is the best way to limit our global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, which we're getting precariously close to. So all the science is showing that we have like 8 years to get this into control. And that is not much time. So that's a great tool. So this is what my ambitions are, but I can't do it alone. So I'm always out there, like at that outreach at Dublin. I'm going to be phoning and emailing everyone I met that day that gave me their contact info and try to bolster our chapter because we really need more people involved. We've got so much we can do. And you can just see through this list some of the things we have done and that we want to keep doing or do more. And so more presentations, more grass tops outreaches to people like Tri-Valley Innovation. So I appreciate that. And if you want to join our chapter, you'll then get our emails about events that are coming up. So I have a calendar, I have files with our agendas and notes, and we have pictures and so forth. So if you just join with your zip code and you're in Eric Swalwell's district, you'll be populated into the correct chapter. We do also have a Castro Valley chapter, our sister chapter over there. So we do communicate quite frequently with them. Okay, so that's my last slide. So are there any questions or comments? I see Ellis with the hand up.
I would like to invite you to join our club and write resolutions that we can pass, other clubs can pass, but more importantly, have an impact on elected officials. Because we help elect elected officials, we have a great impact. We frequently have them speak at our club. Eric has spoken at our club twice, I remember, in the last few months.
Yes, I would think I was at one of them.
You know, and he's our homeboy. He was our club secretary when he was 18. And similarly, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, we have a big impact on her. So
Mark.
You're welcome to join our club. It's not very expensive. And then any club member can write resolutions, bring it up to the club. And if we pass it, we send on those resolutions to our elected officials. We also bring it to other clubs so that it's more than
Great.
one club giving the nod on it.
What about the county
And we bring it to the county central committee, both in Alameda and Contra Costa.
Okay, so frankly, I'm embarrassed to say I've never explored how to join the club, I guess.
We'll send you an email.
It's pretty
But
easy.
I've been a
Go to
lifelong
our
Democrat,
website, click
so-
on join, and
Okay,
if you claim to be a senior, it's $15. So
so
it's not real
Tri-Valley
expensive.
Dump has a website that's how I would go through. Thanks so much, Ellis, for that warm invitation. You bet I'm going to join, because we've been wanting to definitely lean on some of our officials, but we don't have a lot of weight. But for example, at the state level, I'm very inspired by the Climate Center, which is really, they've launched a campaign called Climate Safe California. It's a very aggressive campaign to quickly lower greenhouse gases to net zero by 2030, which seems very ambitious, but they have monthly speakers with fantastic credentials. And I've been very inspired, for example, by they had one presentation all about microgrids, and they really get into the nitty gritty on what it takes to get these solutions in place. But they're all about solutions, and they're all about keeping California in the front lines of solutions. Mary.
Well, I know Evan's always looking for interesting speakers like yourself, like Steve Dunbar, like many of the other people that we have. So bring them on.
You may also want to check out the retired teachers. There's a big group
yeah.
in the Tri-Valley.
Yeah,
That's a
I don't
group?
know if I'm officially retired, but I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I do have my stirs somewhere.
They don't
Okay,
check.
And there's also groups like League of Women Voters and AAUW and all these others out there. So what helps is if I'm given introductions by people in these organizations rather than cold calling. So that's another thing I appreciate is those connections, because that helps a lot to open doors. Who else had their hand
Many
up?
times our members go to meetings with the elected officials and other groups that we either belong to or are allied with. And it makes you welcomer in that somebody that the elected official knows is bringing you to the party.
Yeah, well, Eric Swalwell knows our chapter very well now, or at least his aides do. We've never had a direct meeting with him, but he did come to our youth summit and spoke to the youth. So he's very youth motivated, which I appreciate a lot. Mary?
Mary, you're muted.
I
That's
know.
not-
What about SUPA? Isn't that about?
You briefly touched on the idea of continuous economic growth, and that is not real. It is in many ways predicated on continuous population growth. We've achieved 8 billion, I believe, on the planet so far, and it's growing exponentially with a little bit of a dip from COVID. The wealth of planning and ideas here, I have not seen it incorporate population control.
Okay, so I'll show you, you can experiment with that here in the En-ROADS model. Here's population
Yes.
under growth.
Oh, it's
And-
way down there. Okay.
Yeah, and you can, you start at the status quo. These three magic buttons, in fact, I think I'm going to just go to the model so I can show you. So if you push these buttons, you're going to see what moving the slider means. Okay, so if you do it down here, you're going for a lower population growth than expected. If you're pushing it up, you're going for higher. And then you can see what impact that one thing will have on global temperature rise. But also kind of tied with that is the GDP graph. Okay, so it's not only the numbers of people, but how much those people are consuming. And of course, we all know that if people go into the more money they get, the more they're going to buy. They're going to want a car, they're going to eat more meat and so forth. So this also, with the little I button over here, you can look at some more things about any of those sliders. So they give examples of population, what that means, the big message, the dynamics with other sliders and other inputs on the model, and then potential co-benefits and equity considerations are given for every one of those 18 things. So Mary, it'll be fun to do this together sometime, just meet and play with this and see what are the good, combinations of solutions that work. And, what does this mean for population? How does that work with the economic growth and so forth? So there's one tool to use for sure. But yeah, 10.9 billion people in 2100. Oh my God. So can we bring that projection down?
And
of
how?
course, yeah.
And how can we bring it down?
Well,
Apart from having a pandemic.
Right. So one
Yeah,
of the
follow
big
Alabama and Mississippi.
of Project Drawdown was as you enable families to have smaller numbers of children, you're going to greatly empower the women and girls who will get more education, they will get jobs, they will contribute to their families' well-being and the whole economy if they have time and space. I am a mother. I had two sons 5 years apart. I had time and space before, during, and after to complete my bachelor's degree, get a teaching credential, and so forth, because I only had two kids, right? And I had supportive husband and all that childcare and good stuff. So that's a lot more likely with two kids than if I had had 4 or 6. So thinking about our own lives, but also the women of all around the world. So I could go on and on about those women. I care deeply about them. Are there any other questions or thoughts? Van?
Yeah, I put a thing in the chat column. There's an article today by Ezra Klein in the New York Times, and it's all about the progressive movement or liberals shifting their perspective on economic solutions away from trying to limit supply, or not instead of trying to limit supply, but trying to redirect resources and increase actual total supply of resources within the economy. And so you're not talking about more cars and more roads and necessarily types of infrastructure that might aggravate climate change, but you're dedicating it towards resources for job improvement, teaching, other types of resources that will enhance climate. And so I would recommend that people take a look at this article as a perspective on how we might try to think about improving not only our economy, but saving our planet at the same time.
Yes, great point. I just finished a book. I listened to it on Audible at the library. I haven't given it up yet though, but you might want to watch for it. It's Under the Sky We Make by a wonderful climate scientist. And I can just look it up. But one of the main points in her book is that we need to transition from she calls it the exploitative model, where it's really, you know, exploiting people and resources, to the regenerative model. And she gives quite an elegant argument for that. Under the Sky We Make by Kimberly Nicholas. And if you like podcasts, Living on Earth is a podcast I listen to, as well as Climate One. And Living on Earth is having a book club. And so I looked up some of the titles, and they look like really interesting books. There's one a month, and you would join in a Zoom meeting with other readers of that book. So those of us who are, you know, climate nuts, it's really impactful to not only read these books, maybe twice, but also to talk about them with other people. And you know, you get so much more when you do that. I'm sure you all know that. All right, anything else? I can't see everybody. Evan, anyone else?
No, I think that might be it. So,
all right. So next on the agenda is.
Awesome. Then before we move on, I want to thank you very much. That was a very informative presentation. I put the links into chat, so if anyone wants to follow them, and I'd ask, is it possible for you to send me the slides and I can forward them to all our members? I think.
Yes, I have them on Google Slides, so I can send a link like that.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll send that out to our members if you're okay with that, so everyone can check that out. And I have to say, I haven't gone to as many of Anne's meetings as I would like for the Citizens Climate Education, but I've been to a few of them, and I do highly recommend everyone join. They are a very fun group, first of all, but also the information is just absolutely top notch, and they get guests that are just amazing speakers who really know what they're talking about and really have just like Anne had a bunch of great actions for us, they have a bunch of great actions for the Citizens Climate Education Group. And so highly recommend anyone who has the opportunity to join and attend the meetings, at least try one out. I think you'll have a great time. So with that,
Evan.
You're welcome. And I really want to thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it.
What an honor to be invited. Okay, I'm putting the link in the chat for the slideshow.
Wonderful, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the next item. So we start our regular business for the evening. The first thing is actually, I guess, not quite regular. I want to talk about the pre-endorsement delegates. So because of the way redistricting is working, it's going to be a little bit different for the timeline on our pre-endorsement delegates, which gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to discuss and make sure that we give everyone an opportunity. But what it is basically we get to nominate somewhere between 3 to 5 people, I'm guessing, somewhere in that range-ish. Of people to go to the Democratic Convention, which may or may not be virtual this year. I don't believe it's been decided yet. If anyone knows differently, please let me know. But they'll get to go to the convention, and you get to vote on the pre-endorsement for who the Democratic Party should endorse. Is that correct, Ellis? It's been a little bit.
Well, you misstated something.
Okay.
That you're going to go to the caucus for your assembly district. In the past, most of the club members were in Assembly District 16. That's Rebecca's assembly district. We don't know where the assembly district lines or any of the other lines are going to be, and we probably won't know until February-ish. But let's assume they're about the same. You'll go to a meeting with about maybe 100 similar delegates who have been elected by the clubs. And those delegates will vote on who they're going to endorse for assembly and for congressional districts. And your congressional district will be determined by where you live also. Right now, we don't know if any of those are going to be contentious, but we do know that 2 cycles ago, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan was endorsed at the end of February in the pre-primary endorsement caucus, giving her 3 extra months to run against Catherine Baker and eventually defeat her. So these seats can be consequential. Of course, many times they're not consequential when the people who are running are incumbents and nobody's running against them. In the past, we've either been able to vote live or by email. So there's never been a totally live pre-primary endorsement caucus. Anyway, those are some of the details.
Thank you, Ellis. This is my first time going through the pre-endorsement, actually getting people together for it, so I appreciate the extra help. So we'll be able to nominate, like I said, around 3 to 5 people. It's by a club vote, will be how it works. So anyone who is interested would be able to sign up. I'll send out in future emails a way to sign up, just a quick Google form so that I can keep it all organized who would like to do it. And then we'll have a vote either at our October or November meeting. Normally, we would have to have our list of names by around October-ish, but because of the redistricting issue, we actually won't need to have our names until after redistricting comes, because of the fact that they don't know which district you live in currently. So because of that, we actually have quite a bit of time, so it's not a huge rush, although once the new district lines come out, it's going to be almost instantaneous that they're going to need us to show up and start acting. So we need to be prepared to move quickly. So it's good. What we've done in the past with the club, if I remember correctly, and Alice, correct me if I'm wrong, is we've gotten a list of nominations that was a little bit longer than we thought we needed, maybe 5 or 6 names. And then we took them by basically in the slots that we could fill, we would pick, the first 3 names or something like that.
We had alternates.
Yeah, there are alternates also, should you, for some reason, let's say move out of the district or something like that, there's alternates. And we typically get 1 delegate per 20 members, and we're up about 120, Alan, is that about right? So maybe we'll get 6, but typically we've got somebody who belongs to the club who's way out of the district geographically. And so maybe we'll get 5 seats. And the way it's worked in the past is all of the clubs submit their rosters, and the rule has been in the past, first come, first serve. So if we're the first ones in the gate, we may get all 5 of our seats. Let's assume we have enough members to get 5. And the next club, who may have some members from our club, may not get those members from our club. The regional director has to sort this out, and it's a major headache for the regional director.
Yeah, so we want to be ready to go. And so I'll be, like I said, I will send out an email, anyone who wants to apply, and then we'll have a vote to basically decide who we want as our top picks. Typically, I don't think we get too many more people applying than looking to go, but everyone is welcome. It's a fun event. It's not a major time commitment to do it. And it is an interesting way of kind of getting to know your representatives, because as Asa put in chat, you get some calls and emails from those who are running, just kind of asking for your vote, especially if it's a contentious vote. So that's just a general announcement. There's no action right now. And with that, are there any other questions actually before I move on from that topic?
And just a note on that, Evan, we had 111 unique names on the list. Some of our roster, because it said, +1, we had to have real names. I couldn't just put +1 on there. So I think we ended up with 111 out of our 113 subscribed members.
Okay, so it sounds like we're most likely gonna end at 5, but maybe 4 to 5. It sounds like is probably the number we're gonna end up at. So then with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Alan for the treasurer's report.
Sorry, I didn't get the report written out, but the only major expense we had last month was the insurance since last we met. And that was $550. Our balance is $2,862.33. That's what we have in the checking account. Now, we are going to have some further expenses when the website, because there'll be a monthly billing on that. So that's a slight expense we'll have. We had one new member, and I think that brings us up to 120.
Awesome.
And I
Sounds
will get
great.
a report filed, so you have it.
Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, just as a reminder, we do have that new website now. And so if anyone wants to check it out, it is beautiful. So we'll be talking more about that in the coming months, just as we're rolling out some features on that. So thank you, Alan. I'm going to turn it over to Jackie now for the approval of the minutes, and then you can roll straight into the Central Committee updates.
Okay, did you send out the minutes? We're looking at the July minutes because we did not have a meeting. Do you want me to share my screen or?
Yeah, please.
Just open it up. Okay. Let's see if I can do it with that. Okay, yeah. Can you see my Word document here? So as noted, our last meeting was in July, and Mary Perner and Eileen Gazulio, did I pronounce that correctly? They did a wonderful presentation on framing and messaging workshop and how to build a truth sandwich. If you missed that meeting, I would go back and watch the meeting on YouTube.
Video.
There was some very good stuff brought up, and how do we deal with the anti-vaxxer, the family member at a picnic. And so we went through that. We had a breakout session, and we tackled 3 subjects to build our word sandwiches: critical race theory, voting, and vaccine. You can see the whole meeting on YouTube. It's listed here. The treasurer report, as Alan mentioned, it's been pretty stagnant. I think we had a total of 117 members, actually. We went up a little bit last month. But our pre-endorsement worksheet, we had 111 names on it. Let's see, some new business. Of course, a lot of this stuff is already passed. A lot of the different events that we set up for the recall. So those are, have all been in the past. We will be posting all of our events on our new website going forward. And there's lots of cool tools and things that we can do with the website to keep people informed. I did find one typo on this under new business and announcements. The heading, I misspelled announcements, so I just corrected it. Did anybody see any additional items, corrections, omissions, comments?
I'm a university-based editor and edit pretty carefully, and I think it's great. Another good job by Jackie.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, Ron. You always catch something good in there. So
Mr. Picky usually finds something.
that's perfect.
Just the word announcements.
Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move.
Second,
second.
That
heard
was
them.
Dan and Ron and Evan, I think, all at the same time. Okay, so that's it on the minutes. Regarding the central.
Really quickly, Jackie, let's take the vote on approval.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
Voice vote.
yeah, no worries. So a quick voice vote. So all in favor of approving the meeting minutes, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. And any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
All right.
Absence.
Did I hear a second abstention?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was Dunbar, correct?
You got it.
Yep. Okay. So we have 2 abstentions and the motion passes. All right, carry on, Jackie.
Thank you. Regarding the central committee, obviously they were focused on the recall, and there was updates provided by Donald Lathbury, the political director. They are still planning the Unity Dinner for this year. It's a big fundraising event for Alameda County, but they're debating, how to do that safely in a COVID world. So do they have it virtual as well as an on-site? So more to come on that. Let's see. There was the biggest thing I picked out of this month was a couple of the resolutions, or a resolution that passed. And this was submitted by Andy Kelly and sponsored by Harris Mujadidi, Lama Tabibi, and Aisha Wahab from Fremont. And this was a resolution in support of Afghan refugees. And I would like to send this to our team, Evan, and make a recommendation that we bring this up as well and take on this resolution, adopt it. I think it's an important one. Just briefly, what that does is that it resolves that the Alameda County Democratic Central Committee supports and welcomes refugees from Afghanistan into our community and urges our state and federal leaders to act immediately and with determination and rightfully bring at risk and vulnerable Afghan peoples and their families to the United States for safety, prosperity, and be afforded full benefits to transition into American life. So I think this is a very good resolution, and I will send it for full consideration to the club for next month. The other big thing that I took away from the meeting is that the bylaws are being amended, and that was brought forth by some changes to the bylaws written by Annie Karuga. And there's a bunch of people who sponsored and signed on to that, including myself. And it changes the bylaws that any committee member, alternate, or associate member who votes to endorse specifically at pre-endorsement and party conventions, or endorses or donates to any candidate who is opposed LGBTQIA issues. And they're actually modifying both the Article 2, members of the committee, as well as Article 6, endorsement. So in essence, the committee can pretty much kick anybody out that violates that. And those are the big things. There's also obviously the legislation subcommittee, and there's a long list of legislation that are being endorsed or considered for endorsement. There were 3 that were pulled from the consent calendar. That was AB 43, AB 1147, AB 970. And I will go ahead and send the full list. Those are highlighted in red, the ones that were pulled. And I will send it to our chairs so that they can take it forward and see how they want to approach it with our club. But I'll post that out there for everybody to see. And that's it for the Central Committee.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will turn it over to our final item on our agenda always, which is going to be our matters for consideration. This is general announcements, items you'd like to see on a future agenda, or just anything that you want to make sure that the club and the world knows before we adjourn. I have one small one, and I'll get more information soon, but Livermore Indivisible informed me that in November, they will be hosting a candidate forum for the DA candidates. So as I get more information, I'll make sure everyone knows more about that, and hopefully we can all attend. But I believe it's early November, if I remember the date. Any other announcements, questions, or items you'd like to see on future agenda items? Okay. I guess seeing none, then this meeting is adjourned.
Good meeting.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone. And again, congratulations on all the hard work for the recall. And if you haven't checked out the new website yet, check it out. Tell me what you think.
Website. Really nice job on the website.
Hey, the Livermore Indivisible meeting in November is November 14th so Sunday at 1:30 to 3:30.
Thank you very much. And there we go. So
bye, everybody.
see y'all. Good night.
Thanks.